The billionaire sat alone in his massive office, the city lights twinkling far below his floor-to-ceiling windows, yet none of it brought him comfort. He had everything the world could envy, luxury cars lined up in his private garage, a penthouse that seemed to touch the sky, and a fortune that most could only dream of. But tonight, all of it felt meaningless. He ran his hand over the sleek surface of his desk, cluttered with papers and reports that told the same story again and again. His empire was failing. Months of poor decisions, untrustworthy executives, and bad investments had pushed his company to the edge of collapse, and no matter how many advisors he consulted or how many meetings he held, nothing seemed to fix it. Every day felt heavier than the last, and the man who had once prided himself on control and precision now felt powerless. He remembered the early days, when he had started from almost nothing, working long hours, taking risks that scared everyone around him, and somehow, against all odds, he had built an empire from scratch. But those days seemed like a distant memory, replaced by anxiety, sleepless nights, and the constant fear of losing everything he had worked so hard for. The billionaire leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the ceiling as if the answers might appear there. His mind wandered through the endless possibilities and failures, trying to pinpoint where it had all gone wrong. He thought of the employees who promised loyalty but made secret deals, the board members who nodded in meetings but undermined his decisions behind closed doors, and the countless advisors who seemed more interested in their own gain than in saving the company. He realized that money alone could not solve these problems, for trust, intelligence, and integrity were the true pillars of any successful business, and those qualities were in dangerously short supply around him. As he sat in silence, the billionaire felt a gnawing sense of isolation. He had millions, yet he had no one he could fully rely on, no one who could be trusted to take responsibility if things went wrong. He remembered moments when he had given chances to those who appeared capable, only to be betrayed or disappointed. Each betrayal felt like a blow, but he had to keep going. He had to find a solution before it was too late. The clock ticked late into the night, and the office felt colder than usual. He poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey, not for pleasure, but for the illusion of calm. He knew he needed to act fast, but every plan he considered seemed to have too many risks. The company's future hung in the balance, and with each passing day, the pressure mounted, making him question not only his business strategies but also his judgment in people. It was during this restless night that he realized the bitter truth. The problem was not just the company or the economy, it was himself and the way he had surrounded himself with people. He had assumed that wealth attracted loyalty and talent automatically, but now he knew that assumption had been wrong. True talent, true loyalty, and true intelligence could not be bought, and in a moment of harsh clarity, he realized that the person who could potentially save his company might not be in the boardroom or the executive suite, but somewhere much closer, someone unnoticed, someone he had overlooked simply because of their position. He glanced around his office at the quiet of the night, the shadows stretching across the marble floors, and for the first time in years, he considered looking beyond titles and appearances. He thought about the people in his household, the ones who went about their work quietly, never asking for recognition, never making demands, yet always present, always observing. Perhaps the key to his company's survival was not in the flashy ideas of consultants or the arrogant promises of executives, but in someone who acted with integrity, someone who saw the truth without fear or prejudice. Despite the billionaire's despair, a small spark of hope ignited within him. It was faint, but it was enough to make him realize that all was not lost. If he could find that person, if he could trust someone to act wisely without his constant supervision, there was still a chance to save his empire. And so, with a deep breath, he resolved to watch and wait, to observe quietly, and to test the loyalty and intelligence of those around him. He didn't know who it would be, but he was determined to find the person who could help him rise from the brink of ruin. Little did he know, that the person he would come to rely on most was someone he had always seen but never truly noticed, someone who had been quietly loyal and capable all along. As the billionaire sat in his office, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and success, he was about to discover that true value is not measured in money, but in character, integrity, and courage. And that realization would change not only his company but his life forever. While the billionaire wrestled with the weight of his failing empire, life in his mansion moved quietly. unnoticed by most of the world. Among the polished floors, sparkling chandeliers, and priceless artworks lived someone who rarely drew attention, a woman whose presence was constant yet invisible. The maid had been working in the house for years, performing her duties with a quiet dignity that never sought praise or recognition. She moved with purpose, her steps light, her hands careful, and her eyes always observing. Every corner of the mansion reflected her care, every room seemed to breathe with the order she maintained. Though the billionaire had seen her every day, he had never truly noticed her. He assumed that a maid's work was simple, repetitive, and not worth his attention. Yet, what he failed to see was that she possessed a mind sharp enough to notice details that even the executives overlooked. She understood patterns, anticipated problems, and approached her work with a patience and intelligence that went far beyond cleaning and organizing. Her loyalty was not born from fear or obligation, but from a quiet sense of responsibility, a desire to do what was right even when no one was watching. The maid's life had not been easy. She had grown up in a modest home, learning early that hard work and perseverance were the only ways to survive. From a young age, she had watched her parents struggle and had promised herself that she would never let circumstances define her. This determination followed her into adulthood, shaping her character into someone dependable, thoughtful, and brave. She did not crave wealth or status, only the satisfaction of a job well done and the knowledge that she had made a difference where she could. Every day, she observed the mansion and its inhabitants carefully, noticing the tension that had been growing like a silent storm. She saw the executives whispering behind closed doors, the staff acting out of fear or self-interest, and the billionaire moving through his home with the weight of worry etched on his face. Yet she remained calm, aware that even the smallest actions could ripple into larger consequences. Her mind often wandered to thoughts of solutions and strategies, though she kept them to herself, knowing that wisdom sometimes required patience and timing. The maid was also fiercely independent in her thinking. She did not follow routines blindly, nor did she act out of habit alone. She questioned, observed, and reflected, always seeking the right approach rather than the easy one, and yet, she never drew attention to herself, preferring that her actions speak quietly and effectively. Her intelligence was subtle, woven into the way she handled challenges, solved problems, and anticipated the needs of the household. It was a kind of wisdom that was invisible to those who judged only by titles, wealth, or outward appearances. In the mansion, she was often underestimated, dismissed as someone who could not possibly influence the fate of the billionaire's empire, and that assumption was exactly what gave her an advantage. She operated without expectation, without ego, and without the pressure of anyone thinking she could fail. This allowed her to notice things others ignored, to act decisively when needed, and to remain calm under pressure, qualities that would soon prove invaluable. Despite her lowly title, the maid held a quiet confidence, a sense that her actions mattered even if no one acknowledged them. She had learned that true influence does not require recognition, and true leadership does not always come with a corner office or a title. Her strength lay in her character, her judgment, and her unwavering integrity. The mansion may have been full of wealth, but it was her insight and courage that were about to shine in a way no one expected. Little did the billionaire know that the person he had overlooked for so long was already preparing, in subtle ways, to change the course of his life and his collapsing company. Her loyalty, intelligence, and courage were about to meet his desperation in a way that would reveal her true value, and nothing in the mansion would ever be the same again. The billionaire could no longer ignore the gnawing suspicion that everyone around him, from his executives to his assistants, was acting in their own interest rather than for the good of the company. He had spent sleepless nights analyzing reports, holding meetings, and trying to uncover who could be trusted, but the more he looked, the more he realized that appearances were deceiving. Trust, he thought bitterly, had become a luxury, and in a world of wealth and power, few people valued honesty above profit. That night, as he sat alone in his office, staring out at the city below, an idea struck him, one that seemed desperate, unusual, and maybe even a little cruel. He would conduct a test, a simple experiment to see who truly acted with integrity when they thought no one was watching. He would pretend to sleep, feigning exhaustion and vulnerability, and then observe those in his household in secret. Would they act out of fear, self-interest, or would they act wisely, honestly, and with initiative? The thought both excited and unnerved him, for the answer could change everything. He wanted to find someone he could rely on, someone whose judgment and loyalty were beyond question, and perhaps the only person capable of saving his crumbling empire. That evening, the mansion carried on as usual, staff moving quietly through the halls, executives attending late meetings, and the billionaire's closest associates preparing for another round of decisions that could make or break the company. He feigned exhaustion, letting the weight of his body sag into his chair, eyes closed, breath even, pretending that he had drifted into a deep sleep. He positioned himself carefully so that he could observe, hidden from view but able to notice every movement in the house. The first few hours were uneventful, almost predictable. His assistants tiptoed past, whispering among themselves, trying not to disturb him, some stealing glances to see if he was truly asleep, others moved documents or made small adjustments in ways that seemed more about covering themselves than helping. He noticed the usual flurry of activity, the same patterns that always repeated, but he waited patiently, knowing that the real test would come when unexpected challenges appeared. And then it happened, quietly, almost imperceptibly. Something that would have gone unnoticed by anyone else caught his attention. A critical file, containing the company's latest financial reports, had been misplaced, and the numbers, if left unchecked, could trigger disastrous decisions in the morning. Everyone else in the house seemed oblivious or too self-interested to notice. Their minds focused on personal gain or avoiding blame, but the maid, the one he had barely paid attention to until now, paused, studied the documents carefully, and began taking deliberate, thoughtful action. She didn't panic, she didn't hesitate, and she didn't look for permission. Her mind worked quickly, analyzing the problem, considering possible solutions, and organizing the information in a way that made it actionable. She quietly moved through the mansion, gathering the details needed, correcting errors, and preparing a plan that could prevent catastrophe. Every movement was precise, every decision intentional. As if she knew the stakes without needing to be told, her actions spoke louder than words, demonstrating intelligence, integrity, and courage in a way that stunned the billionaire watching unseen. For the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of hope. He realized that this test, though unorthodox, was revealing the truth he had been searching for. The maid, humble and overlooked, was showing the qualities he needed most in someone he could trust. It wasn't about wealth, title, or education. It was about character, vision, and the courage to act when others hesitated. He watched, almost breathless, as she quietly took charge of the problem, not for recognition, not for reward, but because it was the right thing to do. That night marked the beginning of a turning point, a silent recognition that the person he had underestimated all along might be the very person who could save his collapsing company. The billionaire leaned back, eyes wide open now, realizing that the true test had just begun, and that the outcome could change everything he thought he knew about loyalty, talent, and the value of those around him. The night deepened in the mansion, and the billionaire continued to watch in silence, hidden yet fully alert. Every moment felt stretched, as though time itself was waiting for the outcome of the silent experiment he had created. The house, filled with polished furniture and gleaming chandeliers, seemed to hold its breath, and the usual hum of activity had faded into a quiet tension. Everyone moved as they always did, but the billionaire's eyes were fixed on one person, the maid, the one he had long overlooked, and now, she was about to prove that appearances could be dangerously deceiving. While the others tiptoed and whispered, acting out of fear or self-interest, the maid noticed something unusual, something that could have gone completely unnoticed by anyone else. A series of financial documents, left carelessly on the desk, revealed errors that, if left unchecked, could trigger disastrous decisions for the company the very next day. Many in the house might have ignored the mistake, pretending it wasn't their concern, or worse, taking advantage of it for personal gain, but she did not hesitate, she did not falter. She paused only to study the problem, her mind analyzing, calculating, weighing options, and formulating a plan in real time. Her actions were calm, deliberate, and precise, almost as if she had rehearsed them 1,000 times. She moved through the office, cross-checking figures, reorganizing the files, and preparing a solution that could prevent disaster. All the while, she remained silent, invisible to everyone but the billionaire, who could barely believe what he was witnessing. She was not acting for praise or reward, not even for recognition. She was acting because it was right, because she understood the consequences of inaction, and because she had the courage to take responsibility when no one else would. Every step she took revealed a depth of intelligence that the billionaire had never imagined. She spotted patterns in the reports that others had missed, identified discrepancies that could have cost millions, and devised a strategy to correct them efficiently. Her ability to act decisively under pressure, without panic or hesitation, spoke volumes about her character. Her loyalty, which had always been quiet and steady, now became visible in the most extraordinary way. It was a combination of skill, courage, and morality that could not be taught, and it was exactly what the billionaire needed. The billionaire's heart raced as he watched her work. Hidden in the shadows, he realized that everything he had assumed about power and intelligence was wrong. He had believed that only his executives, his advisors, and the wealthy minds around him could think strategically. But here was a woman, a maid, whose wisdom and insight surpassed all expectations. She had acted without waiting for instructions, without asking for permission, simply trusting her own judgment and her understanding of right and wrong. It was a rare and precious combination, the kind that could save not just a company, but lives and reputations. By the time she had finished, the crisis had been averted, the errors corrected, the documents organized, and a clear plan of action laid out that could prevent catastrophe. The billionaire felt a wave of awe and gratitude, mixed with disbelief. How had he overlooked her all this time? How had he underestimated the very person who had just saved the future of his empire? He realized that loyalty and intelligence are not measured by position, and that sometimes, the most valuable people are the ones who quietly observe and act when others fail. In that moment, the mansion seemed to change, as if acknowledging the weight of what had just occurred. The billionaire knew that his secret test had revealed not only competence but character. Not everyone could act under pressure with such courage and integrity, and the maid had done so without hesitation, without expectation, without reward. It was a revelation that would stay with him forever, a lesson in humility and the true nature of trust. Little did he know, this single unexpected action was only the beginning. The quiet maid had just proven her worth, but the real challenges were ahead, and as he watched her move calmly through the mansion, resolving what no one else could, he understood that his empire's fate was now intertwined with hers, and that her role would be far more significant than anyone could have predicted. The billionaire remained in the shadows of his office, eyes wide open, heart racing, as he watched the maid move with quiet confidence through the mansion. Every action she took revealed a sharp mind, a sense of timing, and an unwavering sense of responsibility that he had never expected. It was one thing to hire someone to clean, cook, or manage a household, but it was another thing entirely to witness someone who could think strategically, act decisively, and take control of a problem without being told. He had spent millions on consultants, advisors, and executives, yet none had shown the level of intelligence or courage that this woman displayed tonight. He leaned closer to the window, trying not to breathe too loudly, afraid that any sound would break the delicate spell of observation. She moved methodically, checking reports, organizing documents, and anticipating consequences in ways that reminded him of the sharpest minds in the corporate world. But unlike the executives, she did not act out of fear or for recognition. She acted out of principle, driven by a quiet sense of what needed to be done. And the billionaire realized, with a shock, that this was exactly the kind of person he had been searching for. For years, he had assumed that loyalty and skill came with titles, that the people at the top were always the ones capable of making the right decisions, but now he saw the folly of that assumption. The maid, with no formal education in business, no corner office, and no glamorous resume, had just performed a feat that many highly paid professionals could not have managed. She had seen a problem, analyzed it, and executed a solution flawlessly, all while remaining invisible to the world around her, and all without seeking any reward. As he continued to watch, he noticed small details that made him even more impressed. She paused occasionally, thinking carefully before acting, weighing the potential outcomes, and anticipating obstacles. She corrected mistakes quietly, without judgment or complaint, and she managed to remain calm under pressure. Something the billionaire had learned the hard way was far rarer than talent or money. Her focus, determination, and clarity of thought were extraordinary, and with each passing minute, he realized that her actions were far more valuable than anything money could buy. The billionaire's mind raced as he considered the implications. He had always believed that he had to control every aspect of his company, but now he understood that true leadership sometimes meant recognizing the strength and intelligence of others. He had finally found someone whose judgment he could trust, someone who would act not out of fear or greed, but out of responsibility and integrity. It was a revelation that shook him to his core, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. He recalled all the times he had been disappointed by those he had trusted, all the times executives had failed him, all the moments when advisors had hidden the truth to protect themselves, and he realized that he had overlooked the person who had been silently observing, quietly learning, and now stepping forward to act when it mattered most. The irony was not lost on him that the very person he had assumed was insignificant had just proven herself to be invaluable. The night stretched on, and the billionaire watched the maid work tirelessly, solving problems that could have destroyed the company by morning. He marveled at her resourcefulness, her courage, and her moral compass, and he felt a deep respect growing for someone he had never really known. She was not seeking recognition, yet her actions spoke louder than words, teaching him a lesson that he would never forget. True talent and loyalty were not always where he expected them to be, and sometimes the people who seemed invisible held the power to change everything. Finally, as she completed her work, the billionaire allowed himself a quiet smile. He had been searching for hope in boardrooms, contracts, and meetings, but it had been right in front of him all along, in the form of a woman whose intelligence, integrity, and courage had just rescued his company from disaster. He knew that he could no longer see her as just a maid, and that her role in his life and his empire was about to become far more significant than anyone could have imagined. By the early hours of the morning, the mansion was still and quiet, yet the energy in the house had shifted. The billionaire, hidden in the shadows of his office, felt a deep, almost overwhelming realization forming inside him. He had spent months, perhaps years, doubting everyone around him, questioning loyalty, and fearing betrayal, but tonight had shown him something he had never expected, something that shook him to his core. The maid, quiet and unassuming, had not only noticed the critical problems threatening his empire but had acted decisively to prevent disaster. He finally understood that she had been testing, observing, and thinking the entire time, her intelligence and moral compass guiding her every move. She had worked with precision, care, and courage, and she had done it without expectation of reward, without arrogance, and without hesitation. Her actions had spoken louder than any report, any meeting, any speech, and in that moment, the billionaire realized the full extent of what had just happened. He had been blind to her value for years, assuming her role in the household limited her capabilities, but he had been completely wrong. As he stepped out of the shadows, revealing himself for the first time that night, he felt a mix of awe, gratitude, and humility. The maid looked up, surprised, her hands still gently organizing the last of the documents, and for a brief moment, the billionaire simply watched her, taking in her calm determination and quiet strength. He had always believed that wealth and position determined a person's importance, but now he knew the truth. Importance was measured by integrity, courage, and the ability to act when it mattered most. "I've been wrong about so many things," he said finally, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I assumed that loyalty and intelligence came with titles, offices, and degrees, but you've proven me completely wrong. You have saved not just the company, but its future, and you've reminded me of something far more important than money or power. You've reminded me of what true character looks like." The maid, usually quiet and reserved, nodded humbly. She did not seek praise, but her eyes reflected a quiet pride. She had always believed in doing what was right, even when no one was watching, and now her actions had been witnessed, acknowledged, and appreciated in a way she had never expected. The billionaire realized that he had been given a rare gift, a lesson in humility and recognition, and he felt a deep desire to make amends for all the years he had underestimated her. He invited her to sit with him, and together they went through the work she had done, discussing her observations, her solutions, and the subtle decisions that had prevented catastrophe. He marveled at her attention to detail, her foresight, and the quiet confidence that had guided every choice. Every suggestion she had made was practical, every action had a purpose, and every move had been driven by integrity rather than ego. It was a level of thinking he had rarely seen in anyone, let alone someone in her position. As the first light of dawn touched the mansion, the billionaire felt a profound shift inside him. He realized that the true strength of his empire did not lie in wealth or titles, but in the people who could act with courage, intelligence, and moral clarity. he had found that strength in the one person he had overlooked for years, and he vowed to honor her not just with words, but with action, recognizing that loyalty, insight, and initiative deserved respect and opportunity. That morning marked the beginning of a transformation, both for the billionaire and for the maid. The billionaire learned the priceless value of humility and gratitude, and the maid's quiet courage had finally received the acknowledgement it deserved. In that moment, the lines between employer and employee blurred, replaced by mutual respect, and the billionaire knew that the decisions made that night would forever change not just his company, but the way he viewed the people around him. He had discovered that true wealth was not measured in money, but in trust, integrity, and the willingness to do what was right when it mattered most. The sun had barely risen when the billionaire realized that admiration alone would not be enough. He had seen the maid's intelligence, courage, and loyalty, but now it was time to act, to transform her insights into real change that could rescue the company teetering on the edge of collapse. He called a private meeting with his top advisors and executives, keeping his tone calm but firm, yet in his mind, he already knew that their decisions alone would not save the empire. The real solution lay in the strategies the maid had quietly prepared during the night. With careful precision, he began to explain the issues in the company's operations, finances, and management, but he did not reveal the maid's work just yet. He wanted the executives to see the scale of the crisis for themselves, to understand that the mistakes and oversights had brought the company dangerously close to ruin. They murmured among themselves, scrambling to offer solutions. Yet none of their ideas came close to solving the problem entirely. It was then that the billionaire paused. And with deliberate clarity, he revealed the documents, the corrections, and the plan the maid had created. A hush fell over the room as everyone absorbed the depth of what had been done. The plan was thorough, logical, and actionable, with solutions that addressed both immediate financial threats and long-term stability. The executives were stunned, not just by the intelligence of the plan, but by the fact that it had been created by someone they had never considered capable of such insight. The billionaire explained how the maid had acted without recognition, without asking for permission, and without ego, and the room fell silent in awe. The maid, standing quietly at the edge of the room, simply nodded, her calm demeanor unchanged by the sudden attention. She did not seek the spotlight, yet the respect in the billionaire's eyes made it clear that her work had already earned her an irreplaceable place in the company's future. Together, they began implementing her solutions step by step, reorganizing finances, correcting errors, and streamlining operations. Every adjustment brought stability, and slowly, the company began to recover from the brink. The billionaire watched closely, amazed at how quickly her insights turned into tangible results. Over the next few weeks, the mansion and the offices buzzed with renewed energy. The employees, once anxious and distracted, began to see the changes taking shape, and the company's performance started improving steadily. The billionaire ensured that every correction made was documented and attributed where due, and he made it clear that the ideas that had saved the company were born from the maid's intelligence, courage, and careful observation. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of pride, not for himself, but for the person who had quietly carried the company through its darkest hours. The executives, humbled by the experience, began to understand that leadership and talent could appear in unexpected forms. The maid's actions had not only solved the immediate crisis, but they had also reshaped the culture of the company, teaching everyone that integrity, initiative, and responsibility mattered more than title or position. The billionaire realized that he had underestimated the true value of people around him, and he vowed never to make that mistake again. By the end of the first month, the company was no longer collapsing. It was stabilizing, regaining its strength, and preparing for a new era of growth. The billionaire knew that this turnaround would never have been possible without the maid, and he felt a deep gratitude that went beyond words. Her actions had not just rescued finances, but they had restored his faith in the idea that true talent, loyalty, and wisdom can come from the most unexpected places. In that moment, he finally understood that the true measure of success is not wealth alone, but the people who make it possible, and the courage to act when no one else will. The maid, once unnoticed and underestimated, had become the most important person in the company's survival story, and the billionaire knew that her role in his life and empire would only grow from here. The night she acted quietly in the shadows had sparked a transformation that would ripple through the company for years to come. With the company slowly regaining its strength, the billionaire knew it was time to acknowledge the person who had quietly turned everything around. The mansion, once a place of routine and hierarchy, now felt alive with a new energy. A subtle tension had given way to respect, and the billionaire understood that this transformation was not only about finances or strategy, but about recognizing the value of people who acted with integrity and courage. The maid, whose actions had saved the empire, had become the symbol of this change, though she remained humble and composed, unaware of the full magnitude of what she had accomplished. He called her into his office, a place she had walked past countless times without pause, and for the first time, he spoke to her directly, sincerely, and without the filter of hierarchy. "I have underestimated you for too long," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You have shown courage, intelligence, and loyalty that surpasses anyone I have ever known. You did not act for reward, recognition, or fear, but because it was right, and that has saved my company, my life's work, and perhaps even more than that, my perspective on the world." The maid lowered her eyes, feeling both pride and humility. She had never imagined that her quiet diligence and careful observation would be noticed, much less celebrated by someone so powerful. She had only done what she believed was right, yet now, the billionaire's acknowledgement made her realize that integrity and wisdom were forces capable of changing even the most entrenched systems. She did not boast, she did not demand, but the weight of his gratitude settled between them like an unspoken promise, a recognition long overdue. Word of her actions spread through the company quickly, and slowly, the culture began to shift. Employees who had once focused on personal gain or office politics now watched her example and began to understand that real value was measured by action, not title. The executives, humbled and inspired, started consulting her insights directly, realizing that brilliance can appear in unexpected forms, and that leadership is not solely about authority, but about integrity, initiative, and moral courage. The billionaire, observing this change, felt a profound sense of relief and inspiration. He had spent years trying to control everything, to rely solely on titles and experience, but now he saw that true strength lay in trust, respect, and the recognition of talent wherever it appeared. He promoted her to a role that allowed her wisdom and insight to influence the company's future, not just behind the scenes, but in ways that would ensure lasting stability and innovation. This was not just a reward, but a statement. True leadership honors those who act with integrity, regardless of their position. As the weeks passed, the company flourished, profits returned, morale improved, and the billionaire noticed something even more important. The spirit of the company had transformed. The maid's quiet courage had set a standard that everyone could see, and the ripple effect of her actions continued to inspire decisions, ideas, and initiatives throughout the business. She had not only saved the company, but had reshaped its culture, proving that character can outperform wealth, that loyalty can outweigh power, and that intelligence can exist in the most unexpected places. One evening, as the billionaire walked through the mansion, he paused to look at her, now seated among advisors, her notes open, her mind clearly engaged in shaping strategies that would impact the future. He realized that his empire's most valuable asset had never been money, contracts, or titles, but the insight, courage, and loyalty of the people who were quietly committed to doing what was right. She had transformed not only the company, but him as well, teaching him humility, respect, and the true meaning of leadership. In the end, recognition was not just about reward or praise, but about seeing, valuing, and trusting someone who had proven herself when it mattered most. The billionaire had learned that the power of an empire is not in its wealth alone, but in the people who act with wisdom, courage, and integrity. The maid, once overlooked, had become its guiding light, a reminder that true greatness often comes from the most unexpected places, and that the quiet, unseen acts of loyalty and intelligence can change everything. And so, the mansion, the company, and the billionaire himself were transformed forever, not by money alone, but by recognition, respect, and the extraordinary courage of one woman who had chosen to do what was right when no one else would. Her legacy, quiet yet powerful, would continue to shape the empire for years to come, proving that sometimes, the smallest and most unassuming figures can make the largest impact.